On behalf of the Nevada Center for Juvenile Justice Innovation, a program of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges through its Research Division and National Center for Juvenile Justice, welcome to 3 Steps to Developing Sound Logic Models, a quick tutorial. Today we have 4 learning objectives. Understand the benefits of learning how to develop logic models, provide practical advice for getting started in 3 steps, learn about common challenges, and provide resources to get started or to improve existing models. We'll begin with a definition. The Center for Disease Control defines a logic model as a graphic depiction or roadmap that presents the shared relationships among the resources, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact for your program. Logic models help community leaders with emerging programs communicate their program ideas and the impact that they will have, plan activities that lead to outcomes that can be measured, prepare to meet standards that many funders require in proposals, and to stimulate critical thinking about where you have been and where you are and where you're going. In other words, to help support your strategic plan. So just take a moment to reflect. What is your experience developing logic models for your program? Has it been a requirement of grants or never a requirement? Is it something that's been optional or mandatory in your work? Is it difficult to know where to start or what many of the different templates emphasize or reflect and which one to pick? Or is this already a habit for your program, but you want to learn more and continuously improve? Logic models can seem confusing and elusive. They go by different names: program theory, strategy maps, outcome models. Many available templates and approaches exist, but there's really no uniform approach. And there are many experts with different styles and preferences that sometimes will claim theirs is the best. And that leads to confusion. Depending on the audience, different levels of detail and emphasis are often required. And to be an effective roadmap, you frequently are constrained to 1 or 2 pages, which can be really challenging if you're trying to bring in a lot of detail or you have a complex program. So 3 steps for developing a logic model that are accessible and easy to absorb. Prepare for the logic model meeting and spend a lot of time preparing and thinking about how that's going to work. Conduct the initial brainstorming meeting and record the results. Conduct a second, broader meeting to revise and refine what the initial meeting started. Step 1, prepare. Take stock of the documents the program already has that address the who, how, and what of your program. That could be your strategic plan, a funding proposal, website content that explains what you do and why it matters. Identify a team that will lead the logic model development, the initial brainstorming. Assign a note taker whose only purpose in the meeting is to take the notes, and outline how they will take their notes: on paper, a flip chart, on a laptop. You might need more than one, depending on how you organize the meeting. Distribute identified program documents to the team well ahead of the brainstorming meeting. Ask the team to review the documents prior to it, and select an initial logic model template. Selecting an initial template can be really challenging. So we're going to take a few minutes to provide some examples and solutions that are at different levels. So ask some questions that help to focus your choices. Does your funder require or recommend a specific template? Your hands might be tied to some extent. Does your association have a suggested starting place tailored to your program space? Is technical assistance available locally for someone to help with selecting a template and facilitating the first meeting? Which aspects of the program need emphasis? Problem statement, program principles or assumptions, strategies, outcomes, or all of that? Begin to explore the options, but choose a model that meets your specific needs if you can, if your hands aren't tied. And if they are tied by a funder to a specific template, you can meet that need, but also select a template to translate that information to at the same time that might meet your needs better for steering the program. As a visual representation of your strategic plan, the logic model is dynamic. It changes over time. It can be organized and pivoted to emphasize certain features for different audiences. Some will need very minimal detail. Others will want a lot of detail. Internally, you're likely to want more detail than what you present outwardly. If making a template decision is overwhelming, start with the most basic: who, how, what model, and that's completely acceptable. The basic who, how, what model is just a 3-column table where you start to brainstorm who you are trying to reach with your services or intervention, how you're going to reach them, and then what you hope to accomplish. This can be a really good starting place to get ideas on paper that then expand and grow. You may have be already past this phase and need a more nuanced roadmap. And we're going to provide 3 examples. Theory-based models emphasize underlying assumptions about the program, and they tie those assumptions to inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and the intended impact, the ultimate impact, your big why of why the program's important. This can be really thought in a more simplified way of your beginnings, your planned work, and your intended results. Outcomes-based models emphasize the connection between activities and outcomes, which often is a focus for audiences, funding audiences, government audiences that want to know what results you're producing. So those can often start with the resources, the inputs that go into the program, the activities that you conduct, the outputs. So what are you producing? And then the outcomes, both in the short term, the intermediate, and the long term, and then your ultimate impact. You can distill that into thinking about your planned work and your intended results. Finally, problem statement anchored models lead with the problem the model will address, and that infrequently are needed to be integrated some way. So this example from the Health and Human Services Department Administration for Children and Families addresses that with leading header rows for the project title and the problem that the project will address, then connects those to inputs, which is similar to resources, activities, outputs, and outcomes. After you've selected a template, an initial template, it evolves, it can evolve, but you have to make a selection initially. Conduct the initial meeting. Develop a strategy for focusing the input of participants. For example, you might assign participants to groups based on one of each of the logic model categories. Distribute worksheets or note cards for them to take brainstorming notes. Consider assigning a team member the role of studying the differences between goals and objectives, the language that people are using, and help to shape that language to make sure they aren't confused as the big group brainstorms. Plan for large group discussion to develop consensus on items using a whiteboard, and consider posting key definitions in the room on your brainstorming worksheet as such as the difference between a goal and an objective statement. And we're going to take a little bit of a look at that as we close. Create a safe and comfortable atmosphere by setting ground rules, then open with an icebreaker. So just make it comfortable, because it's a very challenging task and intense. Discuss what categories are the easiest to think about, talk about, and organize, and begin with those. Often those are the desired outcomes. and are most easily identified. For example, children thrive in school, but they're often the last category on the template or the bottom category on the template. So sometimes it's easier to work from the right to the left or from the bottom up, depending on the orientation of your template. Organize the agenda to best encourage idea generation. If your group is small, it could be everyone brainstorms together as long as there is a note taker. Larger groups may want to assign groups to brainstorm a category and report out for the larger group to discuss and reach consensus. And then sometimes a good strategy is assigning roles by discussants and listeners. Okay, then the final step is pretty simple. You schedule a feedback and refinement meeting. As a team, you're going to review the draft logic model. And in this meeting, consider inviting additional clients or community partners to the discussion. This group can be broader because they're responding to what the initial meeting produced. Use your broadest statements, such as the problem statement or assumptions, as a starting place or icebreaker for the discussion. Some of the challenges to this process are starting logic models before identifying the agency principles and visions, or working from old strategic plans. So really, this process should follow in sequence with the refreshing or the first articulation of your strategic plan. Believing that logic model development is just a one-time rigid process and that there is some kind of unitary gold standard template. Starting with an overly complex logic model template, more than your group can handle based on where they are, and not taking incremental steps in terms of introducing complexity. Ignoring what template requirements might exist for a specific application, you may have to be able to organize your information in a certain kind of template because it's required. You don't have the flexibility. Realizing that for your internal purposes, you can reorganize that information to best suit your needs and level of detail. And then often confusing goal statements with objectives and the language. The language matters. And in closing, we're going to provide a few resources to help with that. So goals versus objectives. The purpose for goals are to help the team have a broad vision and shared purpose, whereas objectives take specific actions to move towards a goal. Mindset. Goals require conceptual thinking. They can be more difficult to shape and shape well. Objectives require strategic thinking and problem solving. Goals can be tangible or intangible. They're a little less specific and a little broader. Objectives are always tangible. Goals can be unspecific, objectives are always specific, and the time frame can be very different. Goals can be completed over a long period, not always necessarily a long period, but they can be. Objectives are always going to have much shorter time frames, and that helps support that goal. A few more tips in terms of what the properties of objectives. Objectives are an approach to a goal. They're narrow in scope. They're easy to measure. They're realistic. They're just tied to specific activities and strategic thinking. They always lead to a specific result. And they're always tangible. So some of the resources that we used to develop this quick tutorial is the HHS, Administration of Children, Youth, and Families Logic Model Template. It's online. Our own organization's Logic Model Primer, also online. From the CDC, Evaluation Briefs, Writing Smart Objectives, online. Goals versus Objectives, the types and the examples and templates, online as well. And you can contact us at the Nevada Center for Juvenile Justice Innovation. In closing, make a list. What do you need to get started?